On March 18th, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin had a long-awaited phone call in which they discussed the potential solution to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. During the phone call, U.S. President Donald Trump rejected a request from Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding assistance from Washington for Kiev. At a press conference on March 19th, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said that the U.S. would continue to share intelligence with Ukraine despite the opposition of Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin. Leavitt said that the sharing of intelligence to support Ukraine's defense would continue. Only a week after cutting military aid and intelligence to Ukraine, the Trump administration reversed its decision after Kiev agreed to a month-long ceasefire with Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump recently asked Ukraine to hand over power to manage energy facilities, including nuclear power plants, to the U.S. to limit Russia's ability to attack these targets, according to the White House, during a phone call on March 19th with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. U.S. President Donald Trump suggested that the U.S. possessing Ukrainian power plants could help ensure their security. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said that President Trump also discussed Ukraine's power supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the U.S. could be very useful in operating those power plants, with its expertise in electricity. The U.S.'s ownership of the power plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukraine's energy infrastructure. However, it is not clear if the U.S. wants to have a specific nuclear power plant or energy infrastructure in Ukraine. Trump has previously hinted at the prospect of creating a long-term peace plan in Ukraine. The handover of Ukraine's territory and the right to control a nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia could be factors in negotiations. Zaporizhia's nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia has been put under pressure by the United States and Washington. Zelensky confirmed that the number of power plants and the neighboring territories controlled by Russia had been discussed with the U.S. in bilateral talks in Saudi Arabia last week. Experts say that the right to control a nuclear power plant is a difficult target for Ukraine, and the ability to maintain a long-term military presence there without pushing Russia out of the surrounding territories is an impossible choice. Kiev hopes to regain the nuclear power plant through diplomatic measures after military efforts to regain control were unsuccessful. The U.S. President's special envoy has said that a U.S.-Ukraine ceasefire could be reached in the next few weeks. In a statement on the Russian-U.S. phone call, U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy said that the exchanges between the two leaders were a step forward. According to Witkoff, the two sides have made more progress than in the past 3.5 years, with important information-building steps being implemented. The U.S. official said, "I really think that in a few weeks we will be able to reach a ceasefire." Earlier, according to analysts, the phone call was expected to last a long time between Trump and Putin, almost without any significant results. Moscow once again made a bilateral response. In addition to the limited proposal for a ceasefire, Russia has used a 1-week delay and a phone call to emphasize that Moscow wants the West to stop all aid activities and share intelligence for Ukraine as part of the agreement. Ukraine said that fierce fighting is still taking place in the Zaporizhia battlefield, while the Russian forces are trying to change the situation on the ground in a positive direction. The Russian Defense Ministry said on the same day that the soldiers of the country have taken control of the village of Stepovoy in the Zaporizhia province from the hands of the Kiev military. However, an update from the Ukraine's deep state page shows that Stepovoy and the area around the village are still in the hands of the country's armed forces. According to analysts at the U.S.-based USWF War Research Institute, Russia seems to be using a delay in negotiations as a tactical move, trying to control as many territories as possible before it can stop shooting. The USWF's report states that Russia's forces are likely to push the west of the Zaporizhia region to the Zaporizhia city, as the Kremlin has repeatedly asked Ukraine to give back the entire Zaporizhia region to Russia. The Russian military is also likely to try to attract and keep the enemy in other areas of the battlefield, allowing the Moscow forces to prioritize certain efforts and win over the entire battlefield when the weather improves. In a phone call on the evening of March 18th, President Trump proposed a joint agreement between the two sides to contain the non-attack of the energy infrastructure in 30 days. President Putin welcomed the idea and immediately instructed the Russian military to abide by it. President Putin also responded positively to President Trump's proposal related to maritime security in the Black Sea, and both leaders agreed to start negotiations to refine the details of the agreement as such. Both leaders reaffirmed their commitment to continue their efforts to resolve the Ukrainian conflict in the Black Sea region. In order to facilitate this, Russian and U.S. experts will be established. Meanwhile, the spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces of the Ukrainian Army, Colonel Vladislav Voloshin, said on March 17th that the Russian military has stepped up operations in the direction of Zaporizhia, taking advantage of the improved weather. Voloshin noted that the soil is drying up and the trees are growing leaves, so the Russian military is trying to improve its tactical position by attacking small-scale assault teams of only 5 to 7 people. Voloshin also noted that the number of FPV drones used by the Russian military every day has increased in March, adding about 50 to 400 to 420 per day. First, Russian President Vladimir Putin rejected U.S. and Ukrainian proposals for a temporary ceasefire on the entire front and reiterated his request for a solution to the war, which would mean Ukraine surrendering. Second, U.S. President Donald Trump and his counterpart Putin agreed to temporarily halt long-range attacks on energy infrastructure, but the exact outline of the temporary order is still unclear. Third, Putin continued to issue a temporary ceasefire order, possibly in an effort to get more orders from President Trump and postpone or delay negotiations on a long-term peace in Ukraine. Fourth, Moscow forces have advanced to the west of the Japanese-occupied region as Russian attacks in the region are on the rise, possibly in an effort to take advantage of the Kremlin's deliberate delay in negotiations on a temporary ceasefire to ensure victory on the battlefield. Fifth, Russian troops have taken steps to advance towards Lyman, Chelyabinsk, and Togres. At the same time, both the Ukrainian troops and the Moscow forces have won near Kudakov. Sixth, Russian troops are said to be increasing the number of information and psychological warfare units. According to the New York Post, on March 18th U.S. time, U.S. President Donald Trump warned that the U.S. could join the Russian-Ukrainian war if this conflict escalates into World War III. Trump commented during an interview with host Laura Ingraham of Fox News just hours after he ended a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin on March 18th. Trump said, "The talks also focused on the idea of re-establishing relations between Washington and Moscow. But the two Russian and American leaders did not mention any peace-related agreements with the Ukrainians." A Russian guided bomb attack on Ukraine in the city of Slovyansk, the New York Times reported, was a few hours after some of the content of the talks had been revealed. The airstrike was also heard all over the country, when drones flew over the skies of some cities, including Kiev, Sumy, and Kharkov. In that context, Mr. Trump in the Fox News program stated that Russia is taking advantage and is protecting Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield. Mr. Trump said they were completely surrounded and that this was not good. Accordingly, the U.S. president said that he was promoting a larger ceasefire in order to keep the U.S. forces from a larger conflict. Mr. Trump said, with the intention that he did not want the war to continue. "Let's see. We are doing this, and there are no Americans involved. This can happen, that is, the Americans involved in the war, if it turns into World War III, a very funny thing. According to the Russian Defense Ministry recently, Ukrainian units organized 5 attacks on the province of Belgorod. At this time, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin were on the phone. Russia said that Ukraine deployed up to 200 soldiers, 5 tanks, 16 armored vehicles, 3 infantry vehicles, 1 UR-77 destroyer, and 4 mechanized vehicles. All units of the Russian Northern Army have stopped all Ukrainian attacks. In an attempt to attack the province of Belgorod, Ukraine lost 60 soldiers, 1 tank, 3 infantry vehicles, and 1 mechanized vehicle. Commenting on the incident, the National Duma representative from Crimea, a member of the Duma Security Committee, Mr. Mikhail Seremet, said that it was not without reason that Mr. Zelensky used the act of provocation on the day of the phone call between the Russian president and he tried to provoke Russia to retaliate in order to provoke Mr. Trump and reduce the value of his peace initiatives. According to Mr. Seremet, Mr. Zelensky once again proved that he is not capable of playing a fair and untrustworthy political game. Mr. Saramet noted that his commitment to peace is a zero and has no meaning, while the Russian and U.S. presidents are taking real steps to achieve peace. Zelensky has issued an order to continue bleeding. It's time to stop him. Meanwhile, British ambassador to Russia, Andrei Kalin, warned on Channel 4 that the UK's policy towards the Ukrainian conflict could lead to the complete destruction of Ukraine. The Russian diplomat said that the US dared to change this policy. They decided that the previous approach was not effective, that they should negotiate with us, should talk to Moscow, to negotiate with Russian President Vladimir Putin to find a solution. Now they have realized that the previous path is a dead end. It not only leads to tension, but also pushes to confrontation. However, the UK still pursues this path and refuses to negotiate with us. According to Mr. Kalin, the UK has chosen confrontation to continue to provoke in the supply of arms and money to Ukraine. What do they want? They want to completely destroy Ukraine. This is a possibility that can happen. Mr. Kalin said that the resume of the dialogue between Russia and the US has become possible thanks to the victory of Mr. Trump return to the White House.